All right, we're back with Matt Smith for our weekly Buffs update. And Matt, we're going to recap the Nebraska game, look ahead to CSU, and um, ugly game. It just was not a good game for the Buffs. I saw some people say, this is as ugly of a game I've been to. I was like, you haven't been to very many Buff games then, because that was, uh, I've seen worse beatdowns than that one. We're going to get into it, but I give him some credit for fighting back in the second half and all that. But not a great game. But how are you doing, Matt, on this
I'm
Monday
doing
morning?
well. I'm doing well. Monday in Omaha. They say it's
Yeah,
the gem of the Midwest. So is Nebraska Midwest? It is
yeah,
technically. Like
yeah,
it's like the western part of the Midwest. Yeah, I'm fine. I'm fine. Just can't wait to get home. I had to do my radio show and cover the NFL all day yesterday, so
yeah,
that's why I had to stick around here. But I'm ready to get home. And yeah, I think you're right. I mean, it doesn't make like my top 10 of worst CU games I've ever seen or
right.
covered. And I think if it had been played Nebraska's team this year against CU's team last year, that game ends like 49-10 instead of
Yeah,
28-10. They
yeah,
definitely kept it within reach. It just they were never in the game though.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
mathematically they were, but they never got things going. So
yeah,
yeah, a tough one, definitely disappointing. A couple days to kind of digest the events of everything and maybe think back and definitely didn't have the right read on this and definitely gave them too much of the benefit of the doubt for sure that they could correct a lot of the issues that they had in 1 week's time.
yeah,
And, a lot of the same things popped up that have been popping up repeatedly now for 14 games in the Coach Prime era. So, again, some good, but that's your really silver linings playbook time there. You're really
yeah, yeah,
reaching to find that. So, yeah, Brian, a bit of a disappointment for sure. It doesn't change things throughout the course of the season. Big 12 still alive, but I'm not
mhm,
gonna put them in that conversation based upon the performance that we saw on Saturday night. You just
right.
can't do that right now until they earn it back, which that's a possibility. That there's still everything in front of them, but right now the expectations, I think for you and I are probably not too much changed. I
No,
mean, I had 6 to 7, you had 7 to 8. I think
mhm,
those are both possible still. There's a lot that they're going to need to clean up to get to those numbers, I think. But look, I mean, all things told, it sucks. You lost to Nebraska. It was the last one in the rivalry series that's scheduled
right.
right now, and they've got bragging rights until or if that ever comes around again.
Yeah, I know Buff fans. Some were say, "Hey, 5,000 some days since Colorado last lost to Nebraska." Nebraska's going to have that number. They're going to know that one by the time the next one's scheduled. But
Yeah.
uh, you know, a couple days after a couple days removed from it, first off, you can do all the analyzing you want to do, and then we just still don't know. You look at Notre Dame losing to Northern Illinois. You look at this
Sure.
one. There, that's what we love about sports, right? I will say this, that I think there's a lot of times way too much, and we're guilty of it too, of overreacting to one game. I do not think that this is what the Buffs are. I think what I underestimated, and I was wrong about in previewing this game, and I picked the Buffs win in a close game, was the fact that they went into an absolute buzzsaw, and you went into as the Buffs, you went into an arena where your rivals had lost three straight games to you. They were not going to let it happen again. And they wanted, it's a cliche, Matt, to say we wanted it more. Nebraska wanted it more because they needed that game because they had lost to them three times in a row. I think Nebraska's program was under a little more pressure to win that game. I think for a lot of reasons, Nebraska showed they wanted that one more. And Colorado walked in a buzzsaw. They had no idea what to expect. And you know, Coach Prime and the players that we talked to, Cam McCraig and Shadur, they all alluded to it afterwards that maybe we weren't ready for this moment, and that was that was pretty clear. And that's what I didn't expect, is for Colorado to not be ready for that moment.
Yeah, it was pretty clear right away, right? They
Yeah,
got rattled early and they just couldn't settle down. That the defense eventually did, which
yeah,
credit to them. And I think the offense put together a couple of drives here or there, but they were mired with, well, I'll tell you who didn't is the coaching staff. I think altogether with a lot of the decisions, the defense maybe
yeah,
did to a degree, but the coaching staff struggled to adjust. I didn't think they had the best game plan, although it would be hard to tell based upon the fact that he got down two scores, so you say Bob's your uncle, and so
yeah,
all that goes out the window that at that
yeah,
stage. However, Brian, I don't know. I mean, this is the only year with Shador and Travis. CU had tons of pressure on them to win this game. They just didn't show up. They just didn't show up. They didn't meet muster. The defensive line dominated them as we thought could have happened heading into the game. But we thought they'd be able to scheme up some other things and maybe get the creative ground game going a little bit.
Yeah,
It's 14 games in and they can't run the football. We have seen horrible CU teams be
yeah,
able to run the football.
hmm,
And we spoke about this in our conversation last week. Is this a bigger conversation about a philosophy rather than just like the
yep,
minutia? Well, I don't know, you tell me, but I thought Saturday proved that it is definitely a philosophical thing here. And look, I mean, they definitely we knew it wasn't going to be a well-oiled machine. Their offensive line is not as good as they thought it was going to be. That's clear
yeah,
now.
hmm,
And running back wise, they're okay. You know, I mean, we were right about that one too in the offseason that I just don't believe they have a special back. Now it's hard to tell because
right,
the line is just not blocking for him whatsoever.
right,
And we can talk about getting into CSU and what they need to do for that, but definitely I just don't want to give them a pass like, oh, well, Nebraska wanted it more. Colorado should have wanted that game a lot. That was
right,
proving grounds. That was the Oregon game for them last year, and they totally didn't meet the moment, and they totally failed. And it's definitely disappointing. And I don't think anybody's going to feel good about it that, oh, well, Nebraska wanted it more. But you're right. Like the environment was electric. It was my first
hmm,
time in Lincoln, and they blow it out, man. I mean, the
yeah,
90,000 fans, the fireworks, I put it on my little vlog I have on my channel. I said you forget what fireworks can do for an atmosphere when you're not worried about them accidentally burning down the whole town like we are in Boulder
yeah,
because it was electric, right? I mean,
yeah,
they cut the lights off, they got the music going, the cell phone lights. I kept thinking to myself, by the way, at the end of the first half, I was just like, okay, this is awful. Like
yeah,
if I'm going to watch this game, I'm going down to the field to watch this game. So I watched this most of the second half from the field, and I got to see the drone show, you know, like on the field. It was sick. It was
yeah,
unbelievable. But I kept thinking how cool and even better this moment would be if it were a tight game. Like if it
yeah,
were a tight game going to the fourth quarter and you had that drone show, the fireworks, and they're honoring the national championship team, that would have been amazing. But you know, I get it now, right? With Lincoln, since I'd never seen it in person, it's just a different environment. I've never been to the big house. I know you have. I've never been to the Horseshoe in Columbus. I've never been to an SEC game. There's a different level to doing college football. And
yeah,
Folsom's amazing. Don't get me wrong. When it's fully packed, it gets rocking. It's an amazing atmosphere for college football, but that's just different, right? That's just
yeah,
different.
yeah, and you're right. I mean, Folsom is great on game day. Lincoln blows it away, in my opinion, and that's just what it is. And they did a great job with that. And I agree with you. There was pressure on Colorado. I just my point is just we've heard for so many years Nebraska's back, and they're not. And I think there was more pressure on Nebraska being at home, and you look at college game day on Saturday morning, everyone picked Nebraska to win it. The Buffs were the underdog. I just think there was a little bit more
Sure.
pressure on Nebraska. They answered the moment, Colorado didn't, bottom line. And um,
People took them more seriously heading into the game than they took Colorado. That's for
yeah,
sure. And I
yeah,
think in that regard, you're absolutely right that
yeah,
all the expectations were that they should beat Colorado, and they did,
yeah.
and they did convincingly.
And I was surprised a little bit that Nebraska jumped into the top 25 after that win. They're number 23. I didn't put them in my top 25. I think they got to do a little bit more. But yeah, I think for Colorado, you mentioned, does it change a whole lot of my outlook on the season? Not really. Um, I've said all along that like you probably got to go 3-1 in the first four, but the one loss that you could accept,
Yeah.
not a lot of Buff fans, but the one loss you could accept was in Lincoln. Now,
You could
maybe not.
survive. You could
You could
survive.
survive it.
Yeah.
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 I'm just saying
Yeah.
if you take out the rivalry stuff and all that,
Oh,
but
for sure. Yeah.
you
Yeah.
can accept that loss. Now, the way it happened is disappointing. Um, I have heard some people say, well, the good thing is they're not going to face a defensive line like that again. Well, yeah, they are. They got Utah on the schedule, Kansas State. There's some defensive linemen in the Big 12 that yeah, they're going to have to deal with that somehow. We talked about the run game last week, Matt, but we got to talk about the offensive line because that's a mess, and that right side is a mess. And Tyler Brown's a great young man. I think he's a really good player. Khalil Benson, same thing. But what has Tyler Brown always played?
Guard.
What has Khalil Benson always played?
Guard or
Tackle.
tackle.
Yeah,
Excuse me.
yeah. So,
Failed
so
that pop quiz. Tackle, of
yeah,
course.
but
Yeah,
yeah, you knew the answer. So,
yeah,
but what are they playing right now? Why is Khalil Benson at guard and Tyler Brown at tackle? That
yeah.
might be where I would start. Now is that the answer? Is there somebody else on the roster that can take those spots? Maybe, but that might be where I would start. Is maybe putting them in positions that are a little bit more comfortable for them.
I don't know why Tyler Brown is at tackle. And look,
Mhm.
I thought he was okay in the North Dakota State game. I did. He was not the other night. In fact,
Yeah,
he was their worst lineman, in my opinion, by a long shot. He just couldn't stay in front of anybody. He just
yeah,
kept getting pushed back into Shador. Maybe that's a change they investigate. I don't know why they made that change in the first place. I don't think they would really tell us, even if we were to ask them. If I'm just being honest, maybe that's worth
yeah,
asking,
mhm,
to be honest, and getting clarification on this week. However, I think it's a part of a larger conversation. I mean, they brought in a lot of transfers into the program, and quite frankly, I mean, Justin Mayers it came in with a lot of hype. He didn't have a great game the other night either.
yep,
So uh, it's tough, Brian. Offensive line is the hardest position to play, in my opinion, and to develop,
yep,
especially at the
mhm,
college level. So it's not like we're strangers to seeing what a struggling front five group looks like. The disappointing part is that, Coach Prime planted his flag in that group up front that they got better. And he called Phil Loadholt the other day the best offensive line coach in the country.
yeah,
I mean, he's done this job for 2 games. I know he's sticking up for his guy there, but there was a reason why one of my questions, and this isn't to blame Phil, and I don't want it to sound like I am, but there's a reason why I think he had to question going with a first timer this year because you don't have time to like develop that. You need it
yeah,
right now. And unfortunately, it just seems like it's not as cohesive as we would have hoped because we do want instant gratification and hopefully they continue to get better. But I don't know. I know Tyler Johnson, I think, was hurt the transfer from Houston in camp, but we expected him, at least I did, to factor into the starting rotation at some point. Sounds like he's not even close, based upon what we know. Um, they have other options if they want to investigate that. I do think part of it was Nebraska. We talked about it last week. They had a couple gorillas on that defensive line. That Ty Robinson and the
yeah,
nine. I mean, those two are beasts.
yeah,
So tough for many guys to be able to stay in front of those two specifically. I don't know. I at least top 3 round NFL draft picks, probably the pair of them.
right,
So I expect some struggles there, but the fact is they never put their heels into the ground and were able to provide a little resistance. And as an offensive coaching staff, they never adjusted to make life easier on those guys. That's why
yeah,
we talk about the pre-snap motion. They did try to go to the tight end after things like did not work for a little while. There's not really, they didn't have any creativity in those packages. I thought probably
yeah,
not something they're comfortable with. A ton of 5 wide. And it's like, okay, I get it. You have to throw the ball, but guess who else understands that? Nebraska's
right,
defense, and they're going to be ready for that. I just felt like from a game plan perspective, they didn't have any answers. And even Coach Prime after the game said, look, if I had the answers to what's going on up front, we'd have probably corrected it by now.
yeah,
And it's week 2. So it's unfortunate. I don't know what it looks like. I'm not going to pretend like I'm sort of expert in offensive line play, that this technique is why he's playing a tackle and he should be inside. I don't know what their reasoning is there. I just assume they have it. The fact of the matter is, though, it has to get better. Otherwise, this season could be in real peril. I'm not going to go
yeah,
there yet. It's just one game, but it has to get better, Brian.
yeah. Excuse me. And yeah, you're right. And Tyler Johnson he made the trip, so maybe he's getting close to health and ready to help out. We'll see. Um, whether it's switching those guys on the right side or personnel, I don't know. I said this last week. I'm not going to look at too much on one game. You have to say the same thing after 2 games, especially with a new line, right? You
Yeah.
don't have a preseason like the NFL. It's going to take some time for them to gel. It might be October. Maybe you keep riding with these guys and say, you know what, they're fine. We just got to gel them. I don't know. I think these next 2 games will tell a lot. Um, one thing, and I'm not an expert on line play either, Matt, but I will say one thing that I've thought about since last year with last year's group was, and I reached out to a former NFL offensive lineman that I know, and I said, I've heard this a lot. I just want to ask you. Offensive linemen tell me they would much rather run block than pass block. He goes, 100%. Absolutely. We love
Oh yeah,
you
yeah,
love run
yeah,
blocking, right?
yeah, yeah.
Because you can be aggressive. And my thought with this group, and I thought it last year too, why not come out and just be aggressive, run the ball, let your offensive line be aggressive from the start. And you know what? Your first couple drives were disastrous the other day anyway when you're trying to throw the ball. So try to establish that run early. Let your offensive line get comfortable and be aggressive from the start, and then let them pass block rather than starting the game where they're backpedaling. I think that can make a huge difference. I don't know if it turns them into the best offensive line. It's not going to do that, but I think that can make a world of difference if you come out and say, you know what, we're going to establish the run and get our offensive linemen in a rhythm, get them aggressive, and Coach Prime and a lot of people call them dogs all off season, right? Well, I feel like they got sort of a leash. They're holding back the leash on these dogs and let them go a little bit because yes, the run game doesn't look good, but it's hard for it to look good when out of 32 snaps on offense in the first half, you run it 4 times.
Yeah, I
How
get.
are you gonna
Yeah,
and when they're running, Matt, it's the obvious running situations. It's 4th and 1. How are you really gonna look good when that's your first run of the game? And Nebraska knows you're gonna do that. And so I just think they're not I think there's things that the coaching staff can do to help this line. My basic point is I don't think this group of linemen is as bad as they looked the other night. I don't think they're great. I don't think they're that bad. I think that the coaching staff can do some things to help them out a little bit more than what we're seeing.
100%. That part I agree with for sure. Absolutely. I mean, look, if it were just easy to establish the run, they probably would have done that already.
Right.
They just, but again, it's back to the
Well, we
commitment.
don't know if they would have already. That's just
Well, if
they
they had
seem to have a
success, if they
yeah,
had success with it, the
yeah,
problem is they just don't really ever have early success, so they just
yeah,
eventually have to ditch it. And I'm not saying that that's the right call either, but
yeah,
yeah, again, it goes back to the commitment conversation. It's an overall commitment to playing that style and to committing to the ground game. And look, I mean, you run the ball 4 times in the first half, even if you are down 2 scores, it doesn't mean you should abandon the running game,
right,
So, but you couldn't sustain drives. Tough to do that when you can't stay on the field as well, and it's also tough to do that when you feel the pressure of the environment, right?
yeah,
So I get it. I get where you're coming from. And Brian, it's much of the same that I've been hoping for, that we'd see some creativity, maybe a little bit more out of pistol. They did run out of pistol. And we talked about that last week during our chat. I said, look, if you're not going to be, under center, then get out of pistol, do some things differently, allow
yeah,
these guys to get ahead of steam in the backfield at least. Didn't see any Michael Welch. Clearly, they don't trust him. Augusta got in the game late. Kind of seemed like those are the carries they gave McCaskill at the end of the Oregon game last year. They seem not to
yeah,
trust him either. Maybe we see more of him. Brandon Hood doesn't seem like they trust him either, or at least he's not ready. So, look, until they figure something else out, Charlie's got to be put to the side now for Dallin Hayden. You can't keep going there. I don't care about your offensive line because clearly it's not going to get better week to week, at least
yeah,
unless they prove it. So you're going to need a back that's going to be able to break a tackle or two and help those guys out and make them look good as well. It's not
yeah,
easy, but it's something you're going to need to do. And yeah, Brian, there's a lot that they can correct. Here's my biggest fear entering this week is that you go into CSU going, oh, well, look, I mean, we can shred these guys through the air. Shador could probably throw for 500 yards, and you just don't run the ball again.
yeah,
That would be failing, in my opinion,
yeah,
because you have to start to put some building blocks in place for the rest of the season. Get some repetition, find some success there. Make
right,
an opponent, make Baylor have to game plan for the fact that they think that you figured out how to run the football. Like give your guys some confidence in that regard. And okay, maybe you don't score 45, and hopefully
hmm
you hold up well enough because I don't overlook CSU now. I mean, they're going to want to beat you. Although I don't know if
yeah,
Torrey Horton's going to play, but it would
right,
be a failure to go into that game and go, oh, well, Shador's going to throw for 500 yards, 5 touchdowns, and we're going to shred them. Like, I believe they could do that. I do. I don't
yeah,
think CSU could hold up against it. But just because you can do it, you got to look at the longer term play here. And I think if you can find a way to find some cohesion on the ground, that's a huge confidence boost for you as a coaching staff and for your personnel. So
yeah,
hopefully that's their approach, but we'll wait to see how things go in Fort Collins.
yeah. And running back wise, I will say they're 2 for 5 the other night on 3rd or 4th and 1. The two that they got were Isaiah Augustave on the last drive. And, you know, he's their biggest back, and he got first downs. Amazing, right? And that's what you were talking about, like getting the guy that can get some push. Um, Charlie Offerdahl is their smallest back. He was 0 for 2 the other night. I understand in some ways why he's playing. Like, again, you and I were talking about this before we started, but like, take PFF grades with a grain of salt, whatever. But if you look at them, their highest rated pass blocker on the team is Charlie Offerdahl. Their lowest rated pass blocker on the team is Dallin Hayden. And so, like, if you just, who knows how accurate that is? Because I was looking at their O-line stats, and I totally disagree with some of the things from the other night. But it's clear when you watch it, Charlie Offerdahl is a better in pass pro than Dallin Hayden. So
Yes.
I get that, but at this point, it's like, okay, forget that. We need to run the ball. I'd much rather see Dallin Hayden running the football. And I love Charlie Offerdahl, but I'd rather see Dallin Hayden. I'd rather see Isaiah Augustine. Last week after the North Dakota State game, Coach Prime is like, I was trying to get Micah Welch into the game late, but then they scored another touchdown, but because Micah's such a tough runner. That was a tough running game. Let him play against Nebraska. I want to see Micah Welch because what we've seen a little bit of him in practice, he is a tough, hard-nosed runner. I want to see him. And Matt, Coach Prime knows all this stuff. I wrote a story today where I went back and I found a quote from Coach Prime after the UCLA game last year. And he said, we have to run the ball because we can't be this
One-dimensional.
All these games, I don't know how many games they played since then. What was that, game 7 or 8 last year? So they played 5 or 6 games since then. They're still one-dimensional. They're still not doing it. Like, but he recognizes it, but they're not doing it. There's no change. And I don't get it. Like, he keeps saying it, but there's no change. He said it last week before the game. We need to run the ball. We need to run the ball. Okay, well, one of your first 11 plays was a run. 4 of the first 32.
Brian, I'm with you, buddy.
I
I mean,
don't
it's
get
something
it.
we're a broken record. We've been
Yeah,
talking about this since they got here. And that's why I say you're 14 games in and they don't know how to run the football.
yeah,
That's a major red flag. It's a crisis at this stage,
yeah,
and people say don't freak out. It's not overreacting to one game. It's a body of work now.
yeah.
And like we said, the 1-11 team ran the football better than this.
Yep.
The
Yeah.
1-11 team ran the football better than this.
Yeah.
So it's not, again, it's a commitment to doing things a little bit of
Now
a
they
different
didn't
way.
throw the ball nearly as well. I will say that.
And Coach Prime after the game in the presser said that, well, you don't often have a good rushing attack and a good passing attack. That's
He
not
said
true.
great. He
Yeah,
said
okay.
great.
Well,
Yeah.
maybe like elite. Nobody's
Yeah.
asking for elite here.
Yeah.
People are asking for like what, 75 yards? I mean, how many rushing yards do they
He's
have through 2 games total?
75. So 37 and a half per game. They're dead last in the country.
Look,
Yeah.
if you were to just remove names, remove schools, remove affiliations, and just put the stats out on paper, it would be like, well, of course they're struggling. They can't run
Yeah.
the football. Nobody wins when you don't run the football. It's just
Yeah.
that's the way it goes. You got to make the defense respect something else. And in doing so, you'll make life so much easier on Shador. And maybe it takes more of a commitment where it's like, ah, we got stuffed again and we got stuffed again. And maybe there's
Mhm.
another 3 and out. But that's the whole point of running those 1 yard, 2 yard. Hopefully they turn into 3 and 4. And look, I'm not expecting them to be some run over you team. I don't need you to run the ball 35 times a game. It just has to be enough to get your opponent to respect it. And maybe that's, hey, let's get our athletes out onto the edge. Why is the Travis Hunter jet sweep waiting until the third quarter, like,
Yeah.
or the fourth quarter, whenever they called that? Like, can we get LaJonte in those situations? How about Will Shepherd on a quick bubble screen? Like, find the paths of least resistance to get the ball into your playmakers' hands with a little space to do something with it. I
Yeah.
think they took a little while to get to the quick game the other night. They probably should have been on that a little faster, make Nebraska have to come up and then try and stretch you vertical. It's just, it's tough though.
Well,
It's
they
easy to sit here and play Monday morning quarterback, but
yeah.
at the same time, you're in the fire, all the bullets are firing, you got the pressure. I know they're doing the best they can, but right now, unfortunately, the best is just not good enough to get to where they want to go
Yeah.
ultimately.
I will say, quick game. I mean, they came out with it actually. It just didn't work out because they had
Right. Oh,
it was
well, I'm
bad.
talking about bringing everything in tight. Like
Yeah,
they
yeah,
were
yeah,
stretching the boundary.
yeah.
You don't have time for Shador to hit a 5-step drop and get to the boundary. Give me
Right.
an inside slant. Like, give me a few things that we can do where we can keep everything tight. It's kind of what they did when they struggled at the end of last year to protect everything. Instead of spreading everybody out, they brought
Yeah,
everybody, they shrunk the field a little bit, and they operated kind of in a closet. And I think it would be helpful for some of those times when it feels like, the dam is starting to break.
yeah. And I'll say with the run game too. Uh, you know, we've both talked to running backs over the years. I remember Phil Lindsay, one of the best running backs in CU history, right?
Sure.
Early in his career, he was frustrated because there was, he'd run for a series and then not see another 3 series, things like that. And he's like, I'm a guy, I need to get in rhythm. And a lot of backs say that, right? The last couple of years when Philip Lindsay got in a rhythm, he's pretty darn good.
Yeah.
And you look at Colorado in 14 games now under Coach Prime. There's been one time that a running back had more than 13 carries in a game.
Hmm.
And it was Anthony Hankerson last year at USC, 16 carries, 74 yards, and a touchdown. I will
Yeah.
take that every day. I want to see whether it's Dallin Hayden, whether it's Isaiah Augustave, whether it's Charlie Offerdahl, whatever. Get a running back in rhythm. Give him 15 carries. That's what I would love to see is a running back with 15 carries in a game. Because I bet you he's going to finish with about 80 yards. Because yes, you're going to have a 3, a 2, a 1, a 4, but then you're going to have that Dallin Hayden run the other night where 17. You're going to bust it and get that. And the only way you can get those runs is if you're consistently, running the ball, and every third, fourth, fifth run can be an 8, 9, 12 yard run, right?
Yeah. Again, I think the frustrating part for me is this is 101 stuff, and we're talking about it 14 games in for
Yeah,
absolutely no reason other
yeah,
than I don't know what they're doing behind the scenes, but it ain't working. And for
right,
me in my life, I'm not telling them what to do, but for me in my life, when I'm doing something a certain way and I keep getting the same results and it's not what I want and it ain't working, guess what I do? I evaluate my process to see if
right.
I can do something differently, if I can mix it up. Shoot, Brian, they can hire as many assistant coaches as they want. You can bring in anyone to help you if you feel like, hey, we need a running game coordinator to come in here and help us figure out what's going on. Go hire somebody. I mean, you
Yeah,
got your NFL connections, Coach Prime. Go figure something out. But but all I can tell you is it ain't working status quo.
yeah,
So again, hopefully they figure that out. And their defense did like I don't want to beat the dead horse, but it feels like that's probably justified because we've been watching them beat the dead horse by playing the same way.
yeah,
And for me, eventually you got to learn from it. You just got to learn from it. And again, I don't think it's something that they don't know, but there's a disconnect as to why it's not getting implemented. And if it's just simply like, hey, we got tackled in the backfield on 3 carries, guess what? That happens a lot. It
yeah,
happens a lot across college football every Saturday.
yeah.
Not, Big Ten football, you don't gain positive yardage with every run.
Right,
And
right.
eventually you do, and you hit a hole. So, not to mention, as you brought up, you put your linemen in run blocking situations instead of pass blocking situations where maybe they got a shot, on
Yeah,
the next pass blocking down because the defense doesn't know what to expect. So, yes, they know they need to run the ball. I just hope we see it at Colorado State. At minimum, you should have 25 carries by running backs against the Rams. If you
yeah,
don't, I think there's a real problem. I think
yeah,
and to expect them to figure it out this is their best opportunity to do so.
yep,
It's not going to get easier. If you don't do it now, then I just don't think you're ever going to be interested in doing it. And
right,
then you have to live with the results of Shador will take you as far as you're going to go.
yep.
And if you can't block for him, you're screwed that day.
And if
And
you
maybe
don't,
that ends up being the case.
and if you don't establish that run, then you've got to live with Shador getting drilled
Drilled.
5 to 7 times a game,
You
if
can't
not
be
more.
throwing offensive linemen under the bus. Like he
Right.
came in the post game press conferences, like, hey, you saw it. It's like, yeah, we did see it. We
Yeah.
did see it, but you haven't changed. So it tells me that it's really not enough of a deal breaker for you to actually do it differently.
Yeah.
And you can't have your cake and eat it too for me.
Yeah.
And
And
so that's where I think a lot of people are frustrated.
Shador's a smart guy,
Oh,
and
Shador is very smart. Yeah.
but when he says, why would we keep doing it if it doesn't work? Because that's what you do with the run game. You keep doing it
Until it
because
does work.
until it does work, because that's how the run game works. For like you said, a lot of teams, you know, Go watch Iowa football. Do they pop every time? No, but eventually you get something going, and maybe Iowa's a bad example because their offense is terrible. But you know what I mean. It
Better this
just
year than it had been. Yeah.
it just works.
Well,
And
not the other night. That's true.
right.
Iowa State won. Yeah.
But you look at all the great quarterbacks too, and like, we're here in Denver. I grew up watching John Elway. John Elway finally won a Super Bowl when he got a run game with Terrell Davis, right?
Mm-hmm.
All the great quarterbacks have to have a run game. Shadour's fantastic. They need that run game. Matt, real quick, we're sort of running out of time here, but I want to ask you as we move forward. Let's look ahead to CSU.
Okay, I got one more for you. I got
Okay,
one more real quick on Nebraska.
yeah.
The other issue that has not been fixed is the kicking game.
Oh,
I mean, I actually had somebody reach out to me, um, saying there is a pretty simple solution that they could make a kicking game. Someone who would know.
yeah,
And it involves, different footballs. It involves, kind of wearing some things in it. Again, I'm not a kicking game coordinator or anything like that, but
yeah,
it sounds like maybe there's some things that they can try that they're not, and I don't know why, but it's not fixed. And
yeah,
sending Jace Feely out there to try the longest field goal that would have ever been made in Memorial Stadium history at the end of the first half when he can't regularly get it into the end zone on a touchback. Come on, dog.
yeah.
Kneel it, throw it in the end zone or get off. I mean, just those are your
Or
two. Kneel it or throw it in the end zone for me. I mean, I
yeah,
don't understand. Like, there's not. Sure, you're just taking a shot, and maybe, but it's humiliating in that moment, and you got to
yeah,
have the awareness to know it. And again, anyway, that was one of my like jaw on the floor moments. It was like he's not really sending this young man out there to try this field goal that's just gonna have everybody laugh at him. I
yeah.
haven't heard a bigger press box laugh than when that moment like the entire press box eroded, and not like CU people but like Nebraska people
Oh,
just
there was
laugh. I mean, it was
yeah.
everybody, Brian.
There were
It was humiliating.
Nebraska writers sitting next to me, and they said to each other, "Are they trying to make fun of themselves here?" I mean, it just. Of course, it would help if LeJontay Wester catches that pass, and if they don't let 10 seconds run off before calling the timeout, and then you can maybe have a shot at a shorter field goal. But yeah, you're right. At that point, just kneel it. Let's move on to CSU.
Yeah.
Matt, real quick, we're running out of time here, but to me, all the bad things happen in Nebraska. This season comes down to the next two games. You have to beat CSU and you have to beat Baylor and go to 3-1. And it starts with CSU. We'll work on Baylor next week, but they have to win this game on Saturday.
Oh, they know that, and they want it bad. We heard Coach Prime talking about how he wishes that the CSU game had been the one that they
Yeah,
started the season with. They've got it circled. They'll, especially coming off of this loss, I would
yeah,
not want to be Colorado State next week. But that being
yeah,
said, if you're Colorado State, well, see, you could point and go, see, I told you they had. We took advantage of that and that and that.
yeah,
And CSU pressured Shador a lot. Now, CSU's different. They've got a really good redshirt freshman running back who had 100 yards against Texas. Torrey Horton is their preseason all everything wide receiver. Sounds like he might not play, which would be a big development for them. But
yeah,
Brian, if there was ever a game that Coach Prime can look back on during Shador's senior year with some real pride and go, that was the black and gold night that we really showed up. It's
yeah,
this one. It's
yeah,
this one. It's on the road in Fort Collins. He doesn't like Jay Norvell or his family for
yeah,
good reason. And the feeling's mutual. Oh, by the way, from the
yeah,
Norvell family, they don't like him or his children at all.
right,
So there is animosity.
yeah,
It was all buddy kind of heading into this game. And I heard Norvell today was very complimentary. Why? Because Norvell knows CU's way better this year as compared to the team that he saw last year at some of the positions that they couldn't slow down last year.
yeah,
So we'll see. We'll see. This is one where the style points matter a little bit, to me at
yeah,
least.
yeah. Well, yeah, and instead of 86,000 fans against you, you're gonna have about 20,000, because I think 10,000 are gonna be about like CU Buffs fans. So it's a much different environment. You got to go out there and win this football game. I agree with you. They could probably put it up 50 times and blow them out. I want to see a run game get established, but however they do it, the Buffs have got to win this football game, and it would be nice to add that
I can't
running
imagine
element
if
to
they
it.
lose. If they
Oh,
lose, Brian, oh my sweet Jesus. Oh my God, it would be something else. But yeah, it would
if
look,
they
you
lose,
gotta win.
we got to be done doing these podcasts.
Yeah. I never want to see your face again if they lose. But no, yes, beat CSU. It's pretty
Yeah,
simple. This is the CU fan for a long time has thought they were better than this game. Nah, this is a game that's really good for your program and for the state. I'm sorry, but it is,
Yeah.
and I can't wait on CBS next weekend.
Yeah. And coming off of that one, go beat a rival.
Yeah, I mean, I
Yeah.
think it would be nice to see.
Yeah.
Sign me up for that. Yeah,
Awesome. Matt,
convincingly.
have a safe trip back from Omaha. We'll see you in Boulder this week.
Sounds good, buddy. Thanks.